Why you are stuck. This is another episode of only teaching you stuff. I don't know. Love, life, and the pursuit of happiness. Today, we're going to talk about why you are stuck. Now, this is a very interesting one today. I'm going to move the camera back a little bit here because a lot of this time when we talk about being stuck, stuck in a lot of ways can mean basically you're not getting the results you want, or life is not fulfilling, or life does not equal your expectations, right? So that's what we mean when we say stuck. So if you're feeling like you're not getting the results you want, life's not fulfilling your expectations, keep listening and we'll talk about why. Because life is essentially created up, when you really break it down, once we start living at higher degrees of law, remember, life will reflect back the level of law we live at. Will reflect back the level of law we live. So, what do you mean level of law we live? Well, at the there are 7 degrees of law. So if you're basically like, what do you mean like law? There's basically 7 degrees of law, right? The very bottom, as you know. Now, for all of you who know my videos, you know what I'm talking about. For those of you who don't, I'll give you a bit of a run course, but check out my other videos, specifically the one on why it changes so hard. Because here we just talk about how there's 7 degrees of law. At the bottom, you're in confusion and complexity. Most people live here. The amount of laws in order to live functionally here, there is an infinite amount of laws. Or at least so many, it might as well be infinite. Because the laws are dynamic and change based off of your race, your creed, where you're living at all the time. So as long as you're viewing life through a 7th degree lens, you will always typically result in complexity and confusion, right? Now, we're going to talk about the feelings as we go. Now, as we live at 6th degree law, we're going to have a sense of order and a sense of you're going to have a sense of order, and you're going to feel things like faith. And usually joy. There's a few other things you might not feel, but you'll have a sense of order, there'll be some joy in your life, and you'll have some faith. So typically, if you have that in your life, you're going to feel like, okay, I'm probably living 6th degree law. Now you're living at 5th degree law, you're going to feel free, as well as faithful and joyful. You're going to be able to feel joy, and you're going to feel free. Now if you're living at 4th degree law, you're going to feel large amounts of love and grace. So in order to live at 4th degree law sufficiently, you have to really be able to forgive. Forgiveness is critical to live here. If you can't forgive, you're not able to live here, which means you're probably not free, because in order to really be free, you have to learn how to forgive. But love is a big component of what you're feeling at 4th degree law. Once you get to 3rd degree law, you're going to feel very peaceful. And you're going to feel very, beyond ordered, you're going to feel very divinely carried. And you're going to feel blessed. Gratitude is going to be the name of the game here at level 3. And then level 2, you're going to feel basically like a god. On level 1, you basically are God, right? So level 2, like a god, level 1, God, right? And so obviously, looking at your life, ask yourself, like, where am I at? Because for a lot of people, feeling faith and feeling joy is really tough. So even just getting to 6th degree law is a pretty big jump, right? Then 5th, 4th, all the way up. Now, the biggest thing is life is reflecting back the level of law you live. So ask yourself, how do I feel about my life in general? Do I feel, and if you're the words, this is why most people are stuck, is because they don't have the words for it. Most of the times people will say, well, I feel good, or I feel bad, or I don't feel not good. Like, okay, this is the issue, is that in order to do that, we have to be able to move into third degree, especially if you want to start moving up. You have to be able to speak and understand third degree law. You don't necessarily need to understand it, but you need to at least be able to use the language of that. And the language of that is, at the top, you're going to have feelings. Middle, you're going to have your thoughts. And down here, you're basically going to have, you're going to be able to have your observations. Or, this is a really big one, presence. Presence is super key, because in order to really understand and interface with reality, you have to be present with it. But a lot of people struggle with basic presence and the ability to focus. And so at all these levels, if you really want to learn how to be present, you have to be able to articulate what you feel, articulate what you're thinking, and then also articulate what you observe and what's happening around you. If you can't effectively do that, with your words especially, you're going to struggle to live at higher degrees of law. Now, there are some people who live at higher degrees of law emotionally and mentally without being able to articulate these things, but at least there's a self-awareness within themselves, almost certainly, of those things, even if they can't articulate it. Kids are really, really good at that, for example. They might not necessarily have the words for everything they're going through, but they are hyper present with what they're feeling. And then that's one of the reasons like they're able to do that. But developmentally, they're still down here because they're children, you know? So as we climb up the ladder, we then need to learn how to articulate our thoughts, then articulate our feelings. But again, there's a lot of children who are much better at doing this than adults, because children are free to do so. But then as we get older, we slowly learn that it's not okay to tell people about how we feel. We learn not to share our thoughts. And then eventually what happens is we stop being able to articulate them. And then to the point to where we don't even share our observations about things or people. And then because of that, we lack presence, because rather than being where we are, our minds tend to wander. And our mind wanders because we haven't exercised this level of articulation in a consistent way. So what happens is that your inner world goes this way and your outer world goes this way. So as a result of that, that creates a gap. See, there's your gap. And within that gap comes all the troubles and travails of life. And when you're doing that, you are living seventh degree law. So if you feel like your inner world and your outer world don't match, i.e. your priorities, so let's say the things that are really important to you, your priorities, and then the way you use your time and your focus, if those are not in alignment, so not aligned, that's going to create confusion and complexity. That also tells you you're living at seventh degree law. And you're like, well, what do you mean seventh degree law? I would ask yourself, what's the framework by which you see life? How do you explain life when you see it? Because for me, I just use this: feelings, thoughts, physical reality. And everything is just that. And that's the framework. So as a result of that, I generally feel a lot of peace. Not all the time. There's times when my mind slips down into lower. I almost never fall down here. Usually when I fall down, there will be times when my freedom is challenged. My sense of freedom is challenged. Very rarely. I do use and go down to sixth degree sometimes because it's very useful to think like this. And once again, joy. But whenever I'm struggling with joy or faith, I usually know I have to come down here, work on something. If I'm not feeling free, come down here. If I'm feeling a lack of forgiveness or some tightness, I work down here in my creative capacity, start creating. And then, when I need to stay peaceful, I just work up here. And so, basically those are the basics of it. So let's really get down to the nitty-gritty. What does that mean? Okay. Well, I'm just going to give you some really simple pointers. Learn how to articulate or how to say what you feel. So, for instance, even if you can't tell someone about it, ask yourself, what am I feeling? And use words, and then we'll go to the Hawkins scale, and I'll give you 14 basic feelings you can go to. But remember, there's an infinite spectrum of feelings, right? Just like there's an infinite spectrum of light, colors, degrees, numbers. So you really want to be able to understand what your feelings are at each level, just so you understand where you're at. Because once you understand where you're at, then you can understand where you want to go. And you can do that once you can articulate the feelings, the thoughts that are in alignment with that, and then what you need to observe to do that. Then you can be present with that moment, whatever you set your mind on. And then what happens is you just start moving naturally towards that point in the graph or whatever. So remember, these graphs line up. So 7th degree law way down here in observations. And then once you do that, feelings and thoughts, this is all kind of lined up actually. So take a nice good look. I'm about to erase it. But a lot of these frameworks stack up and compare to each other, and you realize they interface with each other because we're all just talking about the same thing. So this is called the Universal Codex, and it's basically this idea that all the laws, every degree of law, can be illustrated in any other thing, whether it be colors. So learn how to say your feelings, right? So feelings first, right here. And that's like a really big deal because the level of law you live will reflect back the life. The level of law you live will reflect back to you in your life. And so that's always going to be a really big principle. Just again and again, I'm always going to say that. And so the idea of thinking that you're obeying a law, if it's not reflecting back in your life, chances are you're not living it. And then you're not asked, well, what are the laws? Right? And we can actually get into that. Again, I made a video on what those laws are at every single level of degree. Go find it. I think it's like 70 minutes long or whatever. I spent about 10 minutes explaining each level of the laws. But yeah, I'll see if I can put a card in this video for it. But yeah, go check it out. It's a pretty good video, and I like it. So feelings first. Let's talk about what feelings you want to be able to articulate. Now, the feelings are going to be based on the Hawkins scale because these are a really good scale, and it's a really good measurement tool. Just checking the video, making sure it's working. It's a really, really good measurement tool. So down here at the bottom, we're going to have shame. Shame, shame. And shame is basically what you feel when there's something wrong with you, right? So the reason this is down at the bottom is because this is basically when your outer world is telling you this, but your inner world will never ever tell you that there's something wrong with you. Your inner world's always going to be like, I love you, and I think you're the best. And so this is going to create a gigantic gap, and in that gap slips in the tiny little feeling of shame. Right? The bigger the gap, the smaller the feelings. Kind of a paradox, right? But I can explain that. There's a video I have on emotional intelligence. Go check that out. And it'll explain sort of how feelings work. And when we start seeing them as objects that fit inside of our consciousness, our mind, we start being able to visualize and understand the effects feelings can have on us. And also where our mind is at when we're feeling those things. And so shame is basically that. It was funny, the other day I was talking to a girl and she was really arguing for shame because she was saying shame keeps us from doing the wrong things. And it was tough because I realized that girl had never felt love in that moment because I was like, oh, like this is the only context she has. So I was sitting there trying to explain this to her, but I realized she had never had the experience of like true unconditional love. She had never felt that. Because if you felt unconditional love, you would know that that changes you. True unconditional love is far better at changing people than shame ever was. Shame doesn't do a good job at changing people at all. Shame actually typically tends to reinforce the behavior it's trying to get rid of. But that's beside the point. Or maybe it's not. I think it's important to know what emotions do, because there are objects, they have effects on people. So emotions typically have a guilt, uh, a residue that they create in your lives. So shame typically reinforces the behavior you're trying to get rid of through repression, right? So whenever you shame something, almost certainly that behavior or that feeling didn't go away. It just got hidden. And it's going to come back later in some weird, unmanifested, crazy way. That's just the nature of shame. Shame doesn't actually take care of anything. It's not that type of emotion. So it's usually just going to repress whatever it is. It's what hides it. It's what gets rid of the outer appearance. It's based in masks and personas. But you can be sure if someone felt shame for something, that thing, that the shame did not go away. It's still there, lingering in the background. And it's going to come out either through some type of sickness, some type of odd behavior, or just, mental disability. Because that's what happens. When we internalize lots of shame, it creates a lot of these issues. And almost 100% the reason you're shocked is because you're down here. Whatever you're feeling some shame on, 100% you are feeling shame about that. And so wherever you feel stuck, you need to be able to name it and talk about the shame or whatever you're feeling there. Talk about the guilt. And then as you rise up, you're going to start moving into apathy. A lot of people are stuck here, apathy, because they're like, well, I felt so much shame about this, and now I can't bother feeling ashamed anymore. I just don't care about it. And believe it or not, that is a rise in vibration. It's not a significant rise, right? Where this is 20, this is 40, not a huge game changer, but still way better than anything, right? And then as you get up the scale from apathy, you start moving into fear. And you're like, oh man, now I'm kind of scared about something. Like I have some fear about something. Again, fear is better than apathy because at least you're moving, right? And then after we have fear, we have desire. Desire is like, okay, I've been scared of something, but now I'm clear enough about what I want, that I'm moving towards, that I want this. So let's say you're ashamed that you're broke, and you're like, I hate being broke. I'm just a broken person, and nobody loves me because I'm broke, and I have no money, and I'm just a broke buddy, broke. Just flat broke. And I feel guilt about it because I know I could be doing something, but I'm just a brokety McBroke. Okay, we're back with the second part of the video. Let's talk about moving up. So, let's say you're, a brokety McBroke. You're just broke as a joke. Nobody loves you because you're just broke. You got no money. You feel guilt about it. Then you move into this place where I don't care that I got no money. I'm just poor and there's nothing I can do about it because I'm a loser and you're just giving up. Then you start fearing that you're going to lose out on life because you're just broke. It's almost like he's speaking from experience. Oh my gosh, who is this guy? And then you're just fearful and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm just going to be a broke joke forever and nobody loves me and all these terrible things are going to happen because I don't make money. So then you desire to make money and you're like, oh, I just want to make money. I'm just going to do it. I'm going to try and make money or whatever. Now you're moving up the scale. So after you go into this desire, now you're going to go into, after desire, pretty sure is you're going to feel a lot of anxiety because you have desire and now you're moving towards it, but you suck, right? Because you don't know what you're doing. And so you're going to feel a lot of anxiety. After you get into that anxiety, you're going to feel a lot of anger after you feel anxiety because you're going to start moving into it. And that anger is going to turn into frustration. And that might even turn into rage because you're going to have anxiety, you're going to move towards something, you're going to fail, you're going to suck, or you might have some emotion or whatever, but it's just going to create a lot of anger. You're just going to have a lot of anger. You got to move through that place of anger. This is the scariest part about moving up the scale because a lot of people don't like to experience anger. And the reason is because anger is it's the most powerful negative emotion that's like purely negative. right? And then what happens is we start stepping into some of the more neutral emotions, and the more neutral emotion that we start experiencing, which I would say it's a very neutral emotion, but it's still a important one because it's still pretty much negative. But now you're moving away from that negativity, pride. And then once you step into pride and you're like, you know what? I've been prideful, I've been angry. Now I gotta be courageous. You're gonna step into courage. Courage means you're gonna take the action, you're gonna do the thing you need to do, and then you're gonna take a step. You're going to break through the threshold. And then you're gonna stop being stuck. But it doesn't mean things are just gonna instantly get better. Now, your results might change, you might get better results or whatever, but then you're going to move into neutrality, where you're going to start seeing things from a more present lens. You're going to start seeing things closer to what they are, not just, and you're going to start realizing your biases, your difficulties, all the things you struggle with. You're going to start seeing things just from a more neutral lens. Then you're going to be willing. So you're willing to try new things, you're willing to make mistakes, you're willing to open yourself up. You're just willing to like go learn. You're willing to go check things out. You're willing. You're just going through. And then you start stepping into a neutral, one of the last neutral emotions, first positive emotion. You go into acceptance. And then once you start accepting, like, all right, I'm broke as a joke. I suck at this thing. And I've been willing to do it, but I just accept the process, and you're just acceptance. And then you're staying in this feeling. Now, the reason I'm talking about feelings and I'm not talking about actions is because this is why most people get stuck, is they focus on actions. And the thing is, it's not that actions are important. Actions are extremely important, but you have to be able to know what your feelings are, and you need to be able to articulate them. You need to articulate, communicate, and understand your feelings. Because if you do not understand your feelings will not understand you. And 80% of reality is created because of feelings. And you might be like, what do you mean feelings? Feelings aren't life. You can't touch feelings. You can't da-da-da-da-da. Yeah, silly. Most of reality isn't things you touch, taste, smell, look at. That's not most of reality. Most of reality is what people feel. It's just feelings. The idea, and then that little bit under it is their thoughts. Because this is what you want to start to be able to turn online. Once you get into this neutral place. Actually, I should do that in green so you guys can line it up. Right? But then you need to be able to articulate your thoughts and your thinking. So you need to be able to think clearly. You need to be able to speak logically. You need to be able to articulate what it is you're thinking. But that doesn't do you any good if you can't articulate your feelings first. Because once you can articulate your feelings, once you know what you're feeling, once you know what you're thinking, now you can direct the very last part, what people would argue. Okay, so video cut out a bunch of stuff, but basically, let's take it from the top. So I was saying how you need to be able to articulate your feelings, right? And when you're able to articulate your feelings, what will happen is you're going to then know where you are on this graph. And then because you know where you are, you're going to be able to make progress, move towards where you want to be, right? So if you are feeling something and you're saying, I'm feeling anxious, right? Especially if you're Gen Z, our generation is just, everyone's just anxious, right? So you're like, all right. So that means in order to make progress, you need to start talking about what makes you angry. That's why so many of them are stuck in this loop of anger, right? They're just stuck in this anger loop because they want to progress, but they're not accepting and processing anger. And then they move into pride thinking, oh yeah, like I'm better than everyone, da 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 da. But then where's the courageous act, right? And that's what we need to do. So when you're in this emotion, you need to ask, where is the courage? And then you just slowly move up that ladder. And the most important thing is recognizing whatever I'm doing, whatever I'm thinking, how's it making me feel? And then just keep going with that way of thinking until you can direct your thinking higher up the scale. If you get good at doing that and you're consistent in doing that, eventually what will happen is you'll be able to move yourself up the feelings ladder. Now, if you find a lot of blocks in your thinking and you're like, man, well, I don't know what things to think, this is where you need to research and learn more about the higher laws. Because when you understand the higher laws, when you think the higher laws and you begin to integrate the higher laws, what happens is naturally your feelings will begin to flow up because you start living in a more connected universe. And then because you're living by a higher degree of law, your life will begin to reflect that. So, and that's important because if you don't take care of that, I say it's like a gun. So I wrote this little gun here. You might be like, what that is? So your feelings are like the ammunition in the gun. Your thoughts are like where you aim, where you point the gun, and your actions are firing the gun, right? So you hit what you fire at. Now this is the thing. Imagine you, wherever you hit or what you shoot is what comes back to you. So if you shoot joy, you get more things that create joy in your life. That's what your reality is going to reflect back to you, a joyous life. But if you're coming from a place of apathy, fear, desire, anxiety, anger, pride, you're going to fire off things that create more anxiety, fear, pride. This is why a lot of activism and a lot of like